Some of the best horror movies have stood the test of time and become classics. However, what happens when you update the effects and beef up the story for a brand new audience? Now we're talking remakes. How's it going, everyone? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Figure Out Films. I'm your host, as always, Chris. And before we even get started on this list, I just want to say I really appreciate everyone who subscribed to this channel, this community we've developed. We've finally reached our goal of 1,000 subscribers. And I'm so excited to see this channel grow even more. I would not have been done without all the support from you all who subscribe to this channel and more. So why not stop at 1,000? Let's try to make it to 500, maybe even 2,000 by the end of this year. If you love this content and you want to see this channel grow, please, if you have not hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new updates and videos, don't forget to check out the socials as well so we can keep interacting. Anyway, back to the remakes. Today, I have made a list of my 10 favorite horror movie remakes. Now, I'm not saying that these remakes are better than the original. However, some of our most iconic movies are remakes from earlier movies, but these are 10 of my favorite remakes that I constantly think about, and some of them I really do think are better than the original, so you have to tune in to see which ones are those. Starting off first, I'm going to go ahead and give off the movies I don't actually own physically. So starting off first, we have from 2003, the Platinum Dunes produced Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003 is a brutal, dark, and gritty reimagining of Tobe Hooper's 1974 classic. There are some changes to this movie, however, instead of being the iconic Sawyer family, it's called the Hewitt family, I believe, and it still has the iconic Leatherface. However, Leatherface is not this rambling, almost like man-child. He is definitely big and gross and basically brutal and barbaric, but he's not even the most scary thing about this family. It's actually the police officer. So the police officer in this movie is basically replacing the gas station attendant. And starring Jessica Biel, her and her friends are again like the original on the road towards a destination, but they get stuck in this small town in Texas, and they get pulled over by a police officer, and basically that's where things start to go crazy, where they start to get kidnapped and they try to rescue each other and try to get out of this situation. This is definitely an early 2000s movie where the atmosphere is very dark and it's very brutal and bleak. It's a lot more gross. When we talk about Leatherface, the character, we actually see him throw another person's face over his own, which I think is one of the most iconic things about this movie. This movie is not for the faint of heart. If you like those early 2000s, almost like torture porn films, this is one of those. This is where you're getting a lot of decapitating limbs. You're getting a lot of foul language and just a gross movie, but man, is it such a really entertaining film as well. It's a movie you feel like you need to take a shower after, but like in a good way. However, if you've not checked this movie out, I do highly recommend it. It's a little hard for me to find it on disc, however, so if you can find it on streaming, I think it's definitely worth the watch. Coming up next is the film from 2013, directed by Fede Alvarez, who just made the new recent Alien Romulus. This is his Evil Dead remake. Now, I know this is the fourth installment of this franchise. However, some people don't know if it's a remake or not. I actually do think it is a remake. But basically, Fede Alvarez changes the script on this. Instead of Ash and his friends going to a cabin in the woods, this time around, it's a couple friends and a brother basically trying to have an intervention for their sister Mia, who's unfortunately trying to battle a heroin addiction. When they get to the cabin, the friends realize that somebody had been in there and tampered with things. They stumble upon a book of the dead, which is used for the Deadites from the original movie. They accidentally release a spirit, and Mia starts to see a doppelganger of herself that starts to manipulate and torture the young friends who are at this cabin. This movie is just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's very brutal. It's very gorific. It's a lot of blood on screen, to be honest. Fede Alvarez is a master at doing this, building this tension, making characters, creating characters that you want to fall in love with and care about, while also making that tense nervousness. Again, this is a remake of Evil Dead. The original Evil Dead for me is pretty enjoyable. It definitely is a Splatterhouse kind of movie. However, this movie somehow outdoes it. Fede Alvarez definitely puts a stamp on this, and I highly recommend you check this movie out. If you are queasy about seeing blood and corn syrup on screen, this will be a movie you might want to avoid because it is ridiculous, but also amazing at the same time. Coming up next is a 2010 film that I'd seen before, but I actually needed to rewatch to see if I actually love it. and that is, of course, the 2010 The Crazies. George A. Romero's 1973 classic, The Crazies, which I saw for the first time not that long ago, is a pretty good movie. However, I think George A. Romero's movies, I prefer more like the undead movies. The original Crazies is a little too bleak for me. There's not too much to really enjoy. It's definitely aged a little in terms of like its production, which is part of the charm of it. I'm not gonna bash that. But the 2010 Crazy starring Timothy Olyphant, I think updates the original story for a modern audience, and I think it actually makes the story stronger. It's basically, we follow Timothy Olyphant, who is the police chief of this small Iowa town, and his wife is also the local physician. Now, people start to fall into this disease. They seem to start transforming into almost like an undead. However, they're not completely brain dead. It's basically an infection. I think after post-COVID, this movie, I think, makes the chills of that make it feel a little bit more real. I think Timothy Olyphant as the police chief of this small town delivers a really great performance. I really enjoy him. I also love his police deputy as well. I just love the chemistry of the characters, especially the main trio. I think how the original had every soldier in like a hazmat suit, and there's not much of personality. I think this movie blends that sense of dread a lot more than the first movie. The first one, we're kind of just following the characters from time to time, and they're just shooting the military. In this one, the military feel like an unstoppable force, and I feel like that the characters in this updated version just can never catch a break. There's always something on the next turn going wrong for them, whether it's people shooting other people because it's for sport, or they can't decide if that person is about to transform or not. This is just a truly almost zombie apocalyptic version of George A. Romero's original Crazies, which I actually prefer a lot more, and the ending is so spine-tingling, and the satire is still there. Like, it maintains some of that nature from the original Romero film. So if you haven't seen the 2010 Crazies, I highly recommend you do. Coming up next is a very modern, updated version. I think I speak for everyone when I say this is like the definitive version of this movie. I am talking about the 2024 Robert Eggers Oscar-nominated movie, Nosferatu. Now, let's talk about Nosferatu. 3 Oscar nominations. A remake of the 1922 silent classic film from F.W. Murnau. Now, when I saw the Murnau classic original, I saw it at the Music Box with the live orchestra. That was really cool. However, the movie, despite all the amazing scores playing around me live, the movie is very simple, and the movie just, it didn't click with me. I knew it was a good movie. However, this updated version, I think, makes some tweaks that benefit for it and still make it a modern horror classic. Now, this movie stars Lily Rose Depp, and she's basically seduced by Count Orlok, the vampire who's Nosferatu. They've developed a very serious and very disturbing relationship when she's younger, and then develops. He comes back for his love later on in this movie. Eggers just makes this movie super chilling and sexual and grotesque all in one, and it's very entertaining. Stars Willem Dafoe as like the doctor who coins the term Nosferatu for the Count Orlok character, played by Bill Skarsgård, who I think, people complain about Count Orlok's and Bill Skarsgård's portrayal having like the mustache and being like tall and the voice, and this is the bad woman. I think all of that is so great, and the original obviously could not have done that, being a classic silent film. The visuals of this movie are stunning. It's a Robert Eggers movie. He makes the movies look so hauntingly beautiful. When we follow Lily Rose's husband, Jonathan, who's basically going to secure their fortune through a real estate deal, his travels to I think it's Romania and then back is a pretty breathtaking display of cinematography. I think it should have won for that. But when he comes back, Nosferatu shows up, or Count Orlok shows up, and basically says, in 3 days, Lily Rose Depp, if you do not love me and return that love that you promised me, people will die. And I just love that. It's truly chilling. It's slow burn in some ways. And I hate to use that term, but it's very methodical. I think it's super entertaining. I highly recommend you check out Nosferatu. Coming up next is a 2005 remake film, which I actually haven't seen. I'm talking about House of Wax from 2005. House of Wax, we talked about before, is a kind of a guilty pleasure movie for me, and I feel like for a lot of horror movie fans. Basically, it's a slasher movie mixed in with like a ghost story in a way. It's got a very creepy premise where these friends are trying to go to a football game, but instead they camp out for the night. When they decide to go to the small town for gas, they find out that there is a wax museum that has wax figures all created, and there's an enigmatic person there who is the artist of this kind of creepy house of wax. This stars Paris Hilton, and again, I talked about in a previous video, this movie was made famous because it's the movie you could see Paris Hilton die, which to me is a really creepy, like, commercial way of getting people to watch this movie. I think she actually does her role very well in this. I think it's really creepy. It's kind of tragic in some ways near the end of this movie, where these friends are going through this house of wax and they're falling victim one by one, and you find out more about the lore of the artist who does the house of wax. It's a truly kind of spine-tingling movie that's great with friends. I highly recommend you check this movie out. Coming up next is the 1986 film from David Cronenberg. I'm talking about The Fly. The Fly. This body horror masterpiece film is a remake of the 1958 film called The Fly. Now, because this is a David Cronenberg movie, it's going to have a lot of grotesque body horror sequences in this movie. It stars Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum plays Seth Brundle, who's a scientist, and he's basically trying to create transportation, again, like the original. However, his DNA emerges, and instead of becoming the half man, the half fly, this movie decides to make that slow body horror transformation from Seth Brundle's human body to become an actual fly. It is truly grotesque, and it stars Gina Davis as the love interest, and honestly, it's a very sad and tragic movie. This is, again, a movie that I know is considered one of the best horror movie remakes. It blends the sci-fi aspects of the original 58 classic, but I think the body horror aspect really notches this movie up and cranks that up to 10. The practical effects in this movie still hold up today. I think this is Jeff Goldblum at one of his best. This is a great movie. Tragic, sad, grotesque all at once. Can't miss movie here. 1986, The Fly. Now, we can't talk about remakes if we're not talking about John Carpenter's 1982, The Thing. Now, The Thing is a remake of a Howard Hawks production of The Thing from Another World. That movie isn't too bad. It's basically a Martian lands in Antarctica, and the scientists, military people discover it. However, in John Carpenter's 82 classic remake, he decides, what if the alien is ever evolving but needs a human host? It's basically like a symbiote for my MCU fans there. This movie stars Kurt Russell and Keith David in this movie as a bunch of scientists in Antarctica who discover upon a fallen spaceship that's hosting a living organism. He decides to move from scientist to scientist, morphing their bodies into a grotesque assortment of like a human-alien hybrid. It starts off with a dog and it transforms even more. This movie is truly unsettling because of the isolation of the Antarctica base. The scientists can't decide if they could trust each other or not, which builds the trust issues and the paranoia and the mystery of who is actually carrying the alien, who is not human. It builds a lot of tension and like trying to figure out how to get the alien creature out from the human host is pretty entertaining. You get some of the best practical body horror effects that I've ever seen in a movie in this. John Carpenter also has a really eye for capturing jump scares in this movie, and just like the imagination of what this thing creature looks like. We get like a spider creature, we get it morphed into a giant monster. I think what I love most about this movie is the ending, where Keith David and Kurt Russell are basically can't figure out who's actually the alien, and basically giving up on humanity and having to destroy this thing. This is a very, very great movie. Not my favorite, but of course, is beloved by many. Should I upgrade this to 4K versus keep this Arrow 4K Blu-ray? Let me know down in the comments below. Let's keep it going with 80s remakes right now from the original 50s. I love 1950s sci-fi, but the 80s remakes for me are some of like my favorites. And nothing is like, and speaking of favorites, this is one of my favorite movies of the 80s. This is 1988's The Blob. 1988's The Blob, directed by Chuck Russell. This is a funny, yet very gross and awesome horror remake from the 1958 original. Now, I have not seen the 1958 original The Blob, but from what I've heard and been told, it's really just people talking about the blob and like, you know, being like, oh, beware the blob. But in this movie, you see the damn thing, and it's pretty damn scary and awesome at the same time. Starring Kevin Dillon, Matt Dillon's brother, who's like this awesome leather jacket biker guy with this awesome mullet hair. It's just a really great creature feature. Kind of similar like The Thing in some ways, but you actually see this pink blob that is absorbing humans and basically transforming them and eating them alive. It is actually a genuinely great, terrifying movie, but also has some wit as well from the 80s. It's got some good camp to it. This cast is so great. I just love all the characters. I love how they interact with each other. Again, I think Kevin Dillon is so badass in this movie. You basically go from this small town, like in a 1950s small town, it goes and shows that the blob is absorbing other people in this town. And then also you get to see people, again, talking about the crazies earlier, hazmat suit scientists who just don't know from the government how to destroy this blob. And this third act has a lot of explosions, a lot of like craziness in it. And I just really enjoy this movie. And it's from Chuck Russell, who also directed Nightmare on Elm Street 3. So like, I mean, you're getting some great characters, you're getting some good camp, and it doesn't spare any expense on the gore as well. I mean, this is one of those remakes you just have to see to believe. It's super awesome. You can get it through Scream Factory. I actually upgraded it to the 4K as well. So if you do get the chance to watch The Blob, make sure it's the 1988 version. Coming up next is a 2000s remake that I think might top the original depending on the day. I'm talking about Zack Snyder's zombie apocalyptic movie, Dawn of the Dead. Now, Dawn of the Dead is a 2004 remake of the 78 George A. Romero classic, so 2 Romero movies end up on this list. Dawn of the Dead from 78 is amazing. It's a great time. I think for me, why I like this one versus the 78 possibly is because I just love the characters in this movie. I like Zack Snyder's changes. I think it freshens the movie up. It kind of has that Resident Evil almost feel to it, whereas the 78 is definitely more of the satirical, traditional zombies. However, that movie is so iconic. So again, this movie is way more fast-paced. It's action-packed. It's Zack Snyder, of course. It's directed very interesting as well. And it shows the chaos from the beginning of the outbreak all the way to our collection of characters who go again to the iconic mall. It just feels more big and grand. The stakes are very high in this movie. Less satirical about the commercialism, and I think this mostly focuses on the human aspect of this outbreak. A lot of the characters kind of decide to put their differences aside to work together to survive this. And I really enjoyed that aspect. I think the changes like the zombie baby is really crazy because there's a pregnant woman in this movie. Building an armor van to get out of the mall as well is really entertaining. You don't know if you can still trust each other or not. Again, going back into the trust issues aspects of this movie and the tension that builds is really great. And in this movie, the zombies are freaking fast. They are running. When we're talking like running, I think to like 28 Days Later type zombies in the infection there. So this is a high intense octane action zombie movie that I do not think gets enough love. This movie really questions how the hell do you survive a zombie apocalypse like this, and I think it does it so well. What are your thoughts on Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead? Are you a fan of it? Because I know I am, and that's why it has to be on this list. And finally is, of course, no stranger if you know me, 2007's Rob Zombie's Halloween. It is dark, it is disturbing, it is brutal as hell compared to the 1978 John Carpenter classic. Again, Carpenter coming in twice on this list. Halloween 1 from Rob Zombie. It's just, it's just Rob Zombie's reimagining, but it's a pretty faithful remake to the original. Again, he alters some things to fit his world and his style of writing and directing. This movie really dives deep into the lore and the backstory of Michael Myers, which I really enjoy. I think that's what was missing from the original. But again, I understand it makes the original so iconic, not knowing his backstory and what he was like. However, Rob Zombie carefully does this really well to show the origins of Michael Myers and just being plain evil. Michael Myers in this movie is just a freak of nature. He's so big, he's terrifying, he's buff as hell. The mask, I think, in this movie is actually low-key underrated. I love the design of Michael's mask in this. Dr. Loomis in this movie, played by Malcolm McDowell, is a different, refreshing take on the Dr. Loomis portrayed by Donald Pleasence, who I think is perfect. But I do really like Michael McDowell in this. Now, Laurie Strode in this movie, I know gets a lot of criticism in this, but I really enjoy it. It's like, again, it's updated to the modern time, or the modern audience at the time. And I really enjoy it. And she's not really the focal point of this movie. It's definitely a movie about the origins of Michael Myers. This is a Michael Myers movie. This is not about Laurie versus Michael, which I actually really enjoy. This movie's raw. This movie is gritty. Like that 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre that's dirty and gross. This movie is just brutal and hard-fisted, gripping that knife with the veins popping out type of energy movie that I absolutely love. And I really do think it's worth a rewatch for a lot of people who kind of bash Rob Zombie in his movies. Double check and watch this. However, watch it in theatrical if you can. I think the theatrical triumphs over the unrated version. Those are 10 horror remakes I recommend you check out. What are your thoughts on this list? What are some movies that I missed out on that you highly recommend that I should check out? Also, again, thank you all for subscribing and supporting this channel as we continue to grow this channel. We finally made it to 1,000. I appreciate you all. And if you are new to this channel, you like videos like this, let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well. But that'll do it for this video. My name is Chris here at Figure Out Films. And remember, if you are not watching horror movie remakes, do you really care about cinema? Other than that, I'll see you next time.